Hey, how's it going, everybody? It's Matt Tomorrow here. I want to thank you guys for coming through. Hold on, let me put the link here for Mike V when he wants to come up. All right. What I'm going to do a review of this actual conversation because it's vitally important that we follow these PhD grifters around now that they've taken down their content, so that way you can be able to see what they're actually saying in other places. Now, I did a review of this actual uh, content on another channel, but I think that is vitally important that I do this on my channel as well, because we couldn't get through it because there's a lot of things that people have here that's a problem, and we need to start questioning these people who are middle of the road, who live in left wing areas, who somehow don't understand political history. And what they do is they rage bait people into explaining history to them about why things work the way they work. But these people can do tons of research. They have credentials. They know how to do research on very specific things. But when it comes to politics, a lot of people just play specifically dumb about that because they want things the way that it currently is. Now, they don't come through and say it outright. What they do is they do it through actions, like pretending not to know what's going on or pretending that they don't understand why these things are the way that they are. Because these things are really important because people have turned like black men into a specific standpoint to where you can't really get any progress out of people because so many people is trying to live off of the actual excuse making process for weak men. And we kind of reorganize the conversation around weak men. Okay? Weak men, men who dropped out of the job market, men who dropped out of society, these people don't have problems. If you pay attention to where they go for help and advice, you can understand that they don't have a problem. They made a specific choice about where to go for actual information. They made a specific choice about who to listen to. They made a specific choice. Now, these choices don't really add up to anything, which is their fault. But at the end of the day, there are business people here, like myself, who see these things that are going on and they see the business that's being ran off of and the reorganization around personnel who don't understand how things work. What's going on, Jay Sean? What's going on, Stanley Cross? Going on, Jay Charles, Mr. Hero. Oh, Ronan Son. What's going on? So now, this channel is set up for criticizing such people, right? That's what it's set up for. The space was set up for it, but it was turned into a space for actual entertainment. Like we didn't have enough of that around in the first beginning. So what we're going to do is I'm going to do a review of some of these things because there's some things that is said here that should have had a lot of actual counter arguments associated with it, but for the name and the grace of entertainment, it wasn't. So what we're going to do is we're going to play some of this because you need to vitally know what is actually happening here when these people go to other places and spread their actual myth of black male weakness to other people. So let's go forward. This is the Ask a Brother podcast. He's a YouTuber. It's at Ask a Brother Podcast online. He purports to be an actual clinical therapist, but he bring on bullshit artists who don't care about the betterment of black men to talk to them about things of entertainment. So let's keep this going.
Let's go, let's go, let's go. If you are in the chat right now, welcome to another episode of Ask a Brother Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff St. James. And listen, y'all, I know why y'all are here tonight. So if you are in the chat, make sure you let me know that you're in the building. For starters, make sure that you like this video real quick. Make sure you send it to 2 or 3 people. You know what? Send it to 3, 4, or even 5 people, because I'm telling y'all right now, when this brother comes on, when this guest, listen, let me not get ahead of myself. First off, shout out to all of the subscribers.
Yeah, let you not get ahead of yourself. Because this dude got a lot of explaining to do. And you did not ask this dude any type of questions. But you let this dude just run his mouth on your actual podcast.
I looked at and I just checked about 5 minutes ago. We are at 31,487. So shout out to y'all. Shout out to all of you. Shout out to all of you for have been supporting this channel at 31,487 people. I'm realizing, like, wow, 30,000+ people have joined this channel.
Because black people are fucking stupid. They're incapable of fucking progress. They can't pick a fucking side. They seem to be in the middle, but they live in all these liberal fucking areas. Shocker.
In such a short amount of time. So as you all start to trickle in, y'all that have consistently watched this, y'all know what I'm about to say. Make sure that you like it. Make sure that you share it. Make sure that you subscribe if you haven't done so already. And last but not least, make sure that you send it to a few people as well. All right. So for starters, Miss Plum is already hitting the ground running. So if you have not done so, feel free to donate to the channel. It always helps with me being able to buy equipment, being able to travel.
God damn, this man, get to the big dude on camera, man. Okay, here we
Will
go.
soon realize there's a reason for why I'm so excited and why so many people and so many comments over the last few months have said you got to get this brother on. Please help me welcome Dr. T. Hassan Johnson. What's going on, sir?
Appreciate that.
What's going on, good brother? Welcome.
Now, he did not do any research on this guy, right? He didn't do any research about who this guy voted for. He don't even know what the Onyx Network was. He doesn't know that T. Hassan Johnson came here under the guise of trying to help black men. He provided black men a fake policy proposal that he took to nobody within this liberal state of California, where he actually lives and actually teaches school. He has a very nice political science department at Fresno State. I have reached out to people there at Fresno State to let them know what this bullshit artist is actually putting up. He was like, he didn't check with any of us before putting this out, and they was quite amused at all of this political musing that he's actually doing online, but he keep that shit right to himself when he's walking those halls. Right. So let's keep going here.
Welcome to the show, man. And for starters, man, I'm honored, genuinely honored for you to come on the platform, show love, and show up, because I know you're a busy guy and there's so much on your plate, man. So just welcome to the spot, bro.
And the honor's mine, man. I appreciate it. And like I said, I enjoy where you're going. I enjoy what your channel is doing, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it heads from here. So.
Listen, I appreciate this for sure, and I'm super excited. So real quick, y'all, if because I'm going to be focusing so much on our conversation, and a lot of y'all telling me to focus to make sure I'm listening. I'm always listening, but y'all want me to make sure I'm really, really listening. I'm going to keep an eyeball out for the super chat. So the same person that just now, the super chats or the comments, and I'm going to try to prioritize to read in between our conversations. And over time, I may casually see other people's comments, but there's already 50 comments, and I've only been running this for 10 minutes. So it's not that I'm ignoring everybody. I just want to be more present in the conversation and kind of let it flow for sure. Doctor, why don't you let everybody know a little bit about your background in terms of education and how you kind of were started to seen as like one of the main faces of the studying of masculinity and specifically Black masculinism.
Oh, man.
Okay. So before we go into this bullshit about Black masculinity, just take a look at who's having this discussion. This is not the height of Black masculinity, what's on the screen. What you have is a person who went to school to be a feminist. So what he did is he switched sides, and he found out that selling black men victimhood, it's far more important than getting a job, than getting a career, than participating in society. Um, Thinking that everything that you face in society is an actual problem with black misandry, which he does have a book about that. I'm going to be doing a review of all these books because it's vitally important that you understand what's in these books. Because what Dr. T.S. Johnson never does, he never talked about his father, never talked about his grandfather, he never talked about the long lineage of men that he actually came from that would actually have him in this current generation going to college and trying to throw his own race in specific and gender under the bus so that way he can live off the collective returns of not providing people answers to actual very valid questions in society.
Well, let me see. Bachelor's in Africana Studies and Philosophy out of Cal State Dominguez Hills, master's in African American Studies, Temple University, doctorate in Cultural Studies out of Claremont Graduate University. And I've been teaching here at Fresno State for 17 years. I've been teaching university level for 27. I started teaching university level at 21 years old. So, it started out pretty young. So it's almost 30 years as far as that. But I didn't actually start focusing on Black males in my research until after I got to Fresno State. And, prior to that, I'd only pretty much been introduced to Black feminism as far as gender was concerned. So it wasn't until after that I started doing that research and really discovering what wasn't said about Black males. So that went on for a number of years. And then I ran into Dr. Tommy Curry, and then we have a small cadre of brothers that, helped.
AKA bullshit artists, not brothers, bullshit artists, because they don't solve any problems. They don't pick sides. They're all independents. They live in these liberal areas. They don't put forth any legislation, and any legislation that they have put forward is just for the intellectual masturbation among the men that they're not actually supporting. This is him. I don't know anything about Tommy Curry, so
kind of formulate Black male studies, and Tommy kicked it all off with the Man Not, and we've all just been working to build from there. So there's a small group of a growing number of Black male scholars that have been coming up, getting doctorates in writing, putting out books, and that's the work we've been doing. So that's probably been, I think I met Tommy maybe 11, 12 years ago, something like that. So we've been kicking it off from there. So, that's kind of how it's been,
It's very interesting that Tommy Curry knows the bullshit that this dude is up to. Tommy Curry has never talked about the 19-point agenda that Dr. T.S. Johnson has actually put forward. He has never made a comment on it. So if Dr. T.S. Johnson actually put out this black male agenda, which was never going to get passed, even in a state like California, the most liberal state in the union, I would love to know what he thought about Dr. T.S. Johnson taking all of his content down when it relates to politics after the actual election was over with an exception of a couple of live streams.
Started, and it's kind of where it's going. But a lot of it was really just on the ground. I mean, I started teaching a black male studies class before we had that terminology here at Fresno State. And I mainly was doing it because I saw how black males were being treated. I saw they didn't have much support, particularly here at Fresno. And I've told this story before, but the very first day that I taught the class, I hadn't even walked into the room yet. There was a military recruiter and there was a police detective at the front door waiting for me. And I didn't even know who was taking my class yet. Hadn't opened the door, had no idea who.
This is bullshit. At the end of the day, there are police records of these individuals visiting your actual school. A military recruiter and a police officer is not going to meet with you before you teach a black male studies course. As a person who is retired military and used to be a police officer when I was in the military, this is bullshit. There is no way under concurrent jurisdiction. Okay, where did this police officer or actual military recruiter come from? Why was he at the school? Military recruiters don't really recruit people on campus like that. They just don't. They recruit at high schools. So for an actual police detective and an actual military recruiter to meet together before he taught this class is how he spreads this victimhood bullshit all the time. That's what I'm saying. If you haven't accomplished shit in life except for being in fucking academia, how do you come up with a black male studies class? What?
Who was sitting in there. The
Mhm.
military recruiter wanted to, before I even gave my first lecture, he wanted to take the stage to invite some of my students to join the military and leave college. And the other guy was looking for a brother who was accused of knocking over a liquor store. And he wanted me to go in and point him out. Now, the reason I'm saying that is
That's bullshit. Dude, listen. If a police detective is showing up at a school to arrest someone, they don't go to an actual presentation of where the person is going to be. They know where this person lives. They know where this person works. Obviously, they know that you go to school. There is no actual rational reason that they would come up to a speaker to have him point out somebody that they're investigating. That doesn't make any sense. Police don't fucking do that. If you if you got accused of an actual felony, they're going in with the felony police stop. They're not even going to let you go to a public place like that, especially if they're tracking you across the city. You know what they would do in an actual college? Because I've arrested people at college before. They would call this person down to the counselor's office. And that's where we would read this person their rights and take them into the car and get them up out of there. We're not going to allow this person to go to an actual very public event in front of a whole bunch of people and ask a person to actually point them out to us. That's not how investigations work. Investigations go with a hunch, then we have a name in the face, then you have to go get a warrant from an actual judge to actually go into places. Now, this shit sounds good from a victimhood aspect, but from a practicality aspect, that's not how law enforcement works, bro. It just isn't.
because it framed why Black male studies was so necessary. Because even in regard to how the public engaged us, the way they saw us was either somebody that needs to be, in the military or somebody that needs to go to jail. And that was before the first lecture was given. That was before I could even look at the students in my class. So that was the context for what really started to get me into this, made me want to push more.
Wow. That makes sense. And in hindsight, a lot of the guys that we're thinking of, like you, Dr. Tommy Curry, and others, we didn't realize the need for this until you guys actually put it out there, because we were all experiencing something when we grew up in certain environments in our home. We didn't realize.
Yeah, it's called racism. And if you go to school to actually benefit off of the racism in society and refuse to do anything to try to correct it, then it's going to continue to keep being there. Like calling yourself middle of the road and not participating in the process and living in a liberal city. That's how the shit keeps going for a long time and don't get solved.
Realize what was actually happening to boys and men, especially to like Black boys and men. It was just what everybody was kind of used to. And I'm sure as we dive into it and we kind of get to the gist of what those nuances were, it'll start to flesh out more for the audience what it is that why this was such an important thing to actually create a study out of. Recently, a lot more people over the last month or two have been talking so much about a woman by the name of Helen Andrews. Right? And she did an essay or essay rather, and she spoke, and it was on the great feminization of Western civilization.
Right.
I was extremely impressed with how nuanced and in-depth she was about it, and how she was able to scale it and track what it did and how it changed and morphed over time. What were your initial thoughts about her, the great feminization of Western civilization presentation? Like, what do you think about it? What did she get right? Just overall, what was your opinion about it?
Well, my first thought, I was surprised. I mean, I'm like, this is a conservative white woman, and they're kicking on, because it's more than her. I mean, there were some white women scholars I ran into last year on YouTube that have done some work, and they were talking about feminization in the academy and whatnot, and they were as critical as she. I think hers was more general. They were more
Mm.
specific to the academy, but I was still blown away that this conversation is coming out of women and on the right. I didn't see any of that coming. It really kind of blindsided me. And the nature of the critique was sound,
Mhm.
addressing the shift in the culture in institutions to practices that are more accessible and practiced more so by women. I didn't expect that at all. I was blown
Mhm.
away by it. But after the initial kind of shock from it, when I thought about it, I said,
Okay, let's stop right here. Conservative women are trying to address the masculinity aspect from the standpoint of their black boys being not being able to express themselves in society like previous generations. That's what that's what a conservative means about feminization. Yeah, because when you come in society and things are really modernized, you're not going to be able to talk like some off the cuff bumpkin when you're around people. You're not going to be able to call Asians Orientals. You're not going to be able to call Latinos beaners and bullshit like that. You're not going to be able to call black men colored and just say, "Oh, I just never been around anybody before." Oh, you see, you just colored. No. So what they mean about feminization from a conservative standpoint is the ability to openly disrespect people to their face and treat it like it's a free speech issue. When conservatives are addressing issues about free speech, that's what they're addressing it about. They're not addressing it about trying to challenge power in society. They just want to say a whole bunch of crazy stuff to your face so that way they can just get away with it. Like how in Charlottesville, the police was there to actually protect white supremacist protesters under the guise of free speech, but the people who were there counter protesters, they were seen as the enemy in their own place, even though you had outsiders come in to disrupt an actual area. Because those people who were protesting was not from Charlottesville, but they was there to stir up things in a very small area, right? So that's what happens. There are no conservative women who's allied with men on black, especially black men. There are no conservative allies when it comes to black men. Okay, the conservative party wants to run a country without your ass being around, without your needs being actually addressed, and coming up to a conversation and pretending as if your issues don't exist. This is why they're okay with Tierson Johnson selling the myth of black male victimhood. Okay? Never talks about his father, never talks about his grandfather, never talks about the things that they overcame in their life. Because I can tell you, being in academia for 30 years, dude, you haven't touched grass in a long ass time. Bro, you don't know what people are dealing with in the actual work environment. You don't know what people are dealing with when it comes to AI, when it comes to union organizing, when it comes to anything. And you can really much stake out your actual conversation by just calling yourself middle of the road because you can't take a side in college. They'll run your ass out of there in a heartbeat, right? So there is no such thing as conservative women who care about black people outcome or black male outcomes because their actual standpoint in conservatism is that you're not an American citizen. You are a hyphenated American citizen, not an actual American.
well, as far as black men are concerned, we're the canaries in the mine on this. You know what I mean? In terms of the black community, we've dealt with feminization much longer, in a different kind of way. So, I wanted to, in my last show, just really start off and have a conversation about how much I appreciate where feminization is going as a critique, as a means of analyzing what's going on in everything from the job market to workplace climate to politics and so on and so forth. But there's always a unique kind of shift in the black community.
Okay, so who fights against all of that politically? Who fights against that all politically? You know who fights against that? Who fights against all of those changes to everything that you just named? The conservative Republican Party fights against all of those changes in society. They have always fought against it. So what they do is they play middle of the road. They don't talk about things in society. They go into academia and they have these conversations that don't lead to anything. Because once you start putting actual legislation out there, you see who the people who are actually against these type of things, right? And conservative women come from conservative men who don't give a damn about you or your issues or your complaint. So he got his position in college because of these black male issues. He's not trying to solve these black male issues and these black people based issues. He is not trying to solve that. He's been there for what, 25 years in a liberal state? What significant progress have you made other than talking about shit? Talking about the actual problem. Talking about the actual problem, dude, these problems been here far longer than your 25 years in school. But that's what people do in academia. They want to rehash the same topic over and over again without having the responsibility of taking any real action.
From the larger mainstream, because we kind of run into things differently. We have a different history, we have a different narrative. And so I kind of always want to maintain how we were introduced to these ideas. So whereas you have white folk who are really starting to examine this question of feminization within the last 5 years, in terms of how Helen Andrews framed it, we can talk about it going back to the 1970s and 80s in popular media. We can talk about it in terms of the workplace and the schools. We can talk about graduation rates, graduate school. We can there's so many different areas.
Mhm.
But we can have this conversation where, as you said earlier, I saw these things, but I didn't really have a frame of reference for what I was seeing. I just saw them. I just experienced them. There's, like, for example, just off the cuff, there's been no college campus I've been to, as far as black students and faculty are concerned, where I've seen more men than women. Not one.
Here's another thing. Women are mostly teachers everywhere, okay? The reason why men are not teachers is because it don't pay shit, right? That's why men go into the skilled trades, so that way they can be able to take care of a family, right? You're never going to see more men than women on college campuses, unless you're talking about hard sciences or sports based things. This isn't something that just came out the blue. This has always been the case throughout history. So to try to pretend like this is a new issue is rather crazy. At the end of the day, you still have to exist in society outside of this academic based conversation that is meant to go nowhere. He's not even out here trying to look for a job like you do. He has no answers for you.
I never thought about that. I just
Yeah.
went to school.
Yeah.
I
At
didn't-
least, would you say in the last, like, what, 20, 30 years? Probably.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you see more men than women in elementary school? Did you see more men than women in middle school? Did you see more men than women in high school? So if you didn't see them in elementary, middle, and high school, why on earth would you see them in college? And why would you even bring that up as an actual point to try to push the victimhood narrative of there ain't enough men? Well, the women are supposed to pick an actual guy, so that way you don't need everybody else to pick up the masculinity angle to teach you shit once you get to other places. No one should be putting in on trying to teach you man shit after you leave your household, right? So when conservatives are talking about the feminization of shit, they're talking about white kids not exclusively benefiting from shit. And he knows this, right? He knows this. But he's trying to flip it as if it's some other issue other than that. Given everything that I just said is 100% true about teachers. Masculine men don't go to be teachers. Sports people, yeah. But not just straight up teachers, man. It's just never been a thing.
About the last 30, yeah. I started college in 92. Everywhere I saw it was more, but I didn't even process that at the time.
Same.
You know, I really came to that in retrospect when I thought about it, but I just accepted what I saw and I left it at that. I had no idea about what the implications of that were. and how that even affected, college professors in terms of black men and black women and how that would play out. So these kinds of things she's pointing to as far as feminization is concerned, for a lot of us, it's going to be a lot of retrospection that needs to kind of take place. We're going to have to go back and recount, because for us, it's been something we can acknowledge for much longer than some of these other groups. And so, and
that's not a problem to conservatives, bro. It's okay for you to suffer those fucking issues. Who you think set this shit up? The conservatives set this shit up, dude. This way. They did. So trying to pretend like this conservative lady is like giving you some type of gas on this feminization shit, like, dude, they're worried about their power in society, not yours. They're okay with you pushing black male victimhood because it hurts the people who you represent and it helps the people who they represent, right? Like you have a grand misunderstanding of your ideals that you push in an academic setting. It is not for you to be more represented in society. It's for them to be more represented in society. I don't understand how you don't see that. And plus, you've been in academia for 20 some fucking years. That means that you need a 20 something year track record. Remember, this guy is middle of the road. He is independent in a very liberal state. If there's one state in the union to where you can be able to help minority groups, it is definitely California. But you can't make progress if you're in academia, though. That's why your ass is there in academia and not out here in the real world like everybody else.
Doesn't necessarily have to, kick off any negativity. It's just acknowledging what is. And so I think Andrews kind of opened a door to a conversation that we were touching on in these Black spaces on YouTube, but I think she kind of framed it on a larger scale, and that allows us to kind of open that discussion up.
I appreciate that. Now, you had mentioned earlier that you felt like Black boys and men were experiencing this great feminization of a particular culture or society earlier. What examples can you give to kind of explain, especially for those who are hearing the whole great feminization of Western civilization? They're probably hearing this for the first time. Like they may have heard about like gender wars. They may have heard about like men and women not getting along and the divorce rates. But from the starting with the Black community, and then we can kind of extrapolate or go to like the general population. What did you note of examples of what Black boys and men were experiencing in terms of the feminization of the culture?
Well, a lot of it started with the exclusion of Black boys, for example. I'll give you an example. Matter of fact, in the comments.
Which is an actual conservative construct, bro. That's a conservative construct, is excluding people from the conversation. That's what conservatives do. And then they'll walk right up to your face and rage bait you by pretending that those issues are not actually issues. They're known for that, sir. You know full well that they're known for that. And that's why I don't trust anybody in academia, especially somebody who's been there for longer than 5 or 6 years, don't have a strong position on anything, don't have any legislation that's written. Listen, in my small town in Mississippi, there were 77 people who graduated in my actual graduating class. Most of the women do have PhDs in my actual class. The difference with those women who have PhDs, they're actually going to local schools, doing studies, changing the nutrition, changing the actual education, things like that. That's what they're doing with their PhD on top of being associated with nonprofits. That's what you're supposed to be doing with an actual PhD. What these people do with a PhD is they duck and hide within actual academia. They sell their bullshit ass books that they come out with because you're forced to buy these books whenever you actually have to take these elective classes in order to graduate. These things have not pushed the bar forward for Black men at all, because what they're talking about is an equal protection issue. Conservatives don't believe in equal protection. They've never believed in equal protection. And so the things that you are fighting is conservatism. But you can't fight conservatism in an actual educational level because you depend on these actual people for a job. While you stage these conversations that don't have any type of success or progress associated with it, as your means of so-called dedication to the cause, in air quotes. You don't do anything realistic when it helps people, other than get people to believe in bullshit concepts that don't go anywhere. That conservative woman isn't your fucking friend.
Section of my last video, there's a brother that gets in there and he says, I have a young son, and I was trying to find books, children's books for my son. He said I couldn't find any, but every one I did find were targeted for girls. Right? I've had
What the fuck, dude? There ain't no children's book that's geared toward men. Why do you need to outsource your parenting to children's books? It ain't the existence of the books. It is trying to actually outsource your responsibility of raising your child to other people. And these other people don't care about you in general. Dude, listen, you can literally live nearly your entire American life without even engaging or interacting with black people. As being 13% of the population, you can literally do that as a white person. You can literally do that. But here's another thing that's very exposing. If you knew that was the problem, how come you didn't write more black boy based books rather than just sit in academia talking about the victimhood of not being represented? You've done nothing on the ground to be able to do that. I was raised by my grandfather primarily because my dad was an over-road truck driver, much like myself right now, but I own a fleet of trucks. My grandfather never outsourced masculinity or the teaching of such to any other person other than him. It was his responsibility to make sure that I knew what the actual mission was. Mother was a home health nurse, father was an over truck driver. The actual responsibilities of parenting came on to him and most people in the actual community itself. He didn't depend on the existence of books to actually raise me as a person. That was his responsibility. And he actively wanted to make it his responsibility. Most of these people who are having these kids right now, they wanted to sleep with the woman, but they didn't want to deal with the consequences of having a child. So that's why all of this outsourcing of masculinity has to be dealt with by everybody else in society because the man himself is too weak to actually do anything else about it. He is a right wing grifter. He knows that. I can guarantee you. You pull him out of this setting and actually ask him some actual real questions about where he lives and what his actual pathway to progress is, it exposes all these guys.
other fathers, and I went through this when my son was young, looking for everything from after school programs to programs designed for black boys. Overwhelmingly of the programs we found, they were targeted for girls. These are the kinds of low level things we started to kind of.
Okay, here's the thing. I've been a part of a lot of nonprofits in Mississippi, a ton of them. You know who comes in and shut down these actual nonprofits? The men come shut them down, not the women. The men come in, they buy their way onto the board, and they shut down these nonprofits because everybody's economically compromised when it comes to money and disrupting the actual school to prison pipeline. These people buy their way onto boards and they shut down progress itself. Okay, that's what always happens. And what the most success that I've actually received during some of these actual things is actually saying it is for women, but using the actual resources that you get to help everybody with it. That's how you get around that. Actually wanting things to exclusively be for boys, boy, dude, you will never get any type of funding for that. Dude, you can't even get homeless shelter that is centered on men. Homeless shelters that are actually centered on families come first. Then it comes women. And men don't ever get any actual help in society when it comes to that. You're talking about a person who has been homeless. So I know how to navigate these systems, and I know it's not there. But this academic talk about stuff that don't lead to any realistic action is really crazy.
Notice, right? If you talk about the pedagogy in the K through 12 classroom, much of it, and this is, across race, much of it is fixated on defining the ideal student really as female. It's not targeted for boys. And so you kind of see how the impact has been. If you look at the graduation rates in the last 10 to 20 years, they're overwhelmingly more female than male, especially when
That's an aspect of the motivational problem. That is not a problem that women are graduating more than men does. These women grow up in the same households that men does. If you don't graduate as a person, is that really an absence of black boy focus? It isn't. Let's say that you went to a Catholic school. Catholic school is going to teach Catholicism in the actual school. They're not going to teach atheism or Southern Baptist shit in their school. Why? Not the focus. Most of the actual funding is based on who graduates the most, rather than trying to get men to understand their place in society and how education can actually help them. These people have decided to lean on the victimhood that black men or men in general, black men in specific in his case, are not being focused on, and that's the reason why they don't have the motivation to adhere to the standard that everybody else have in society. It's really crazy.
you talk about those who are going into higher education as far as college is concerned. So you see these trends in different spaces. One of my main areas has been media analysis. And that started out because I was just teaching about stereotypes, and it was something I was drawn to. And as an 80s latchkey kid, my sister and all we did was watch movies.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it wasn't until retrospect that I started to really pay attention to what I.
Okay, because you and your sister watch movies, that's not emblematic of how everybody raises their fucking kids. Just because somebody went through helicopter mom shit is not emblematic of how everybody raised their kids. That's a household by household basis. And once you reach the age of reason, you have to be able to stop that stuff from happening. Not try to make it an actual part and parcel of how you was raised to spread it to other people to be okay.
Grown up watching. But in this kind of framework from the 1980s onward, you talk about black men and women, and the narratives and experiences and even complaints that we have about everything from dating to marriage to so on and so forth. Black men really didn't have a platform on the same kind of scale that we saw happen with women. I mean, we had.
Why do you think that is? Women are not a threat to the dominant society power structure. Men are. So to expect to be represented by a group of people who do not want you in charge or in power of everything is not an actual issue. You solve those issues in your own life. Remember, after the election, you started doing movie reviews. You didn't talk about the 18-point agenda or 19 points at this point. You didn't even recognize that your 19-point agenda was considered DEI by the Conservative Party. So everything that you put forth as a way of correcting things in a racially focused tone was taken out by the Conservative Party, not the liberal one, right? But you want to turn this into a depth of victimhood that you can teach to other people. And here's the other thing, that other people are dating black men. They are interacting with black men. It is infuriating to see a 600-pound hair hat tell you about the weakness of fucking black men when they interact with them on a daily basis. They interact with these people who do great things. Now, you don't believe in that shit because you think that things have to be built specifically for us in order for us to do better. That's never been the actual case throughout American society. What's going on, Cedric Webb? But you have to realize that you got to be able to make these changes in your own time. The representation through media, it doesn't mean anything, and it doesn't lead to anything either. You have to fix these things. When I left Mississippi at 17 years old to go to the fucking Air Force on graduation night, nobody gave a shit that I was 17 years old. What they gave a shit about was these are the standards. You need to catch up and deal with the actual standard here. Nobody cares about how you're raised. You're going to adhere to these standards, or we're going to beat your motherfucking ass if you get us all smoked. Smoked in the military is being dropped for push-ups or everybody being punished because of one thing, singular thing that a person does. So it made an actual system to where we took care of things in-house and made sure things that happen. Okay, you don't need these bullshit artists from actual academia to make this sense for you. Building these platforms that help him. Okay, if people don't have sense enough to go to the proper answers, and they need educated grifters like what's on the screen here to provide you some type of representation, dude, you'll never get it. You'll never get it. Okay, Jason Black or Tariq Nasheed can't point to a singular person that they've helped be better at nothing. They can't. It's impossible. That's not even why they're there. And it's the same thing for people who are in academia. They do the same thing. They specialize in a cornered conversation, put their hands over their ears, and give representation to people who they're not actually trying to help.
Hip hop, we had comedy. They had Steven Spielberg directed movies. I mean, it was a global stage for a visual narrative about the experiences of Black women. You didn't see that same kind of access for Black men.
Listen, trying to get yourself verified about your stories through actual media and all that type of victimhood shit, that is not going to help you, bro. It ain't going to help you with shit. Tell me, how did The Color Purple help with black male representation? You were not even supposed to be trying to look at media for your actual representation. You didn't need the media for actual representation. Okay? These things are free for you to actually go through and actually accomplish on your own outside of these mediums. Like when I go home to Aurora, Colorado, and when I go to the actual library, to which I'm always going to vote for tax increases to increase things at the library, you know who I see at the library? Everybody but fucking black people. I see Latinos there. You definitely see white women there. You see white men there. You see even some Native Americans there, but you don't see black people there. Why? We don't even focus on education. The only thing we focus on is trying to get people into these bullshit sports or tolerating the fact that we need to have our politics discussed by actual fucking comedians. That's crazy. That's not needed at all. You can adhere to the same standard that everybody else does. But if your actual parental figure don't even see that much in you to actually compete with the rest of society, you're consistently are going to be behind. And these people are simply taking advantage of the fact of this framework that's already there. They're not even trying to change the framework. You don't have whites who go around trying to make fun of their actual politics. You don't have that shit when it comes to whites. You definitely don't have it when it comes to actual Native Americans. You don't see it with Asians. You don't see it with Latinos. But it always happens with black people. Why? They don't want you invested or interested in things that's going to change the body politic. They're too busy trying to make money off things the current way that it is, not change anything.
Much of the time, we had to wait for Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy, somebody else to say something that
Fucking comedians to fucking represent you in society? Dude, that's why you go into career fields, so that way you can be the representative of your actual people. Not these fucking comedians and entertainers. These comedians and entertainers are not interested in actually helping you with anything. The only thing they want to do is leverage collective ignorance for cheap laughs. They don't give a fuck about trying to help you get a fucking job. They're not trying to do that shit.
We kind of could have aligned with, but we didn't have a platform on that scale that we could really speak to. So there's so many different areas where you start to see this, but pulling them together.
Okay, so was Eddie Murphy supposed to build a platform out of Lethal Weapon and the fucking Nutty Professor to fucking include you? Nigga, that's entertainment. That's not even real. It ain't even real life. It's not. They were not supposed to build a platform for you to come pick stuff up and leave with. That's what your life is for. That is what your life is about. Your life is not about trying to be verified through this bullshit. Like, what is going on here? You know, Lethal Weapon, Beverly Hills Cop. Like, was that supposed to be your way of being introduced to masculinity? Are you fucking serious? Sorry about that. Yeah, I did. I mean, but you understand my point. But that's what I'm saying. Like, how are you waiting for entertainment? Literally, entertainment is going to help you be a more masculine man in society, right? How is that going to happen? Say it again. How could you in academia could be waiting on Eddie Murphy and his personal success to trickle down to dudes who are not focused on shit in society, right? Right? This is literally like blaxploitation 2.0. That's what it is. Blaxploitation 2.0. Intellectual blaxploitation 2.0. They're literally exploiting all of these cultural issues to build a platform for themselves and not solve any of these fucking issues.
There wasn't the easiest thing to do because despite experiencing it, I really hadn't thought about it. If you think about whether or not you've ever had a Black male studies course, let alone degree, for those of you who went to college.
Okay, why the fuck would you need a black male studies course or a degree? Where are you going to get a job at? Okay, let's say that you went to elementary school and they asked you what you wanted to be when you grow up. And they're like, I wanna major in black male studies. Okay, great. What job are you going to be able to get once you graduate from black male studies in a conservative society that is set up to pretty much not represent you? You have to overproduce even to be seen in society itself. That's the way that works. And I'm not really. I'm against the framework, but I'm not against people putting in that fucking work. I'm not against people putting in that work. I'm not against it at all. You're gonna have to leave this sports talk radio bullshit alone. You're gonna have to leave a lot of bullshit alone in order to actually make it in society. To actually focus on the thing you need to focus on. The whole culture is set up to getting you to actually not focus on things that you need to be focused on. And if you take the bait of doing that, which is your fault, not the schools, not the entertainment. If you take the bait of doing that, that is your fault, not theirs.
It's not something you normally saw, right? You saw women's studies, you saw Africana studies, which in many ways is kind of overwhelmed in some respects with Black feminism. You really didn't see a frame.
Then why the fuck did you go major in it, dude? If it's overwhelmed with Black feminism, then why did you go major in it? Remember, you looked over all you. Okay, so you pick up the college handbook. You look through the catalog because when you look through the actual catalog for an actual college, you see all the degree specifications. You look at all of the classes that uh, actually adhere to the actual body of knowledge that is actually for that actual degree. And you looked over all that shit and decided, you know what? Bingo, Africana studies. That's what I want to study. What job was you supposed to get other than academia outside of Africana studies? Which I'm not against it as an actual degree preference, but I'm just saying, how are you going to be able to take care of a family? How are you going to be able to actually do things in society by going to go major in Africana studies? Say it again. He knew women were dominated in the educational space. So he went into education so that way he can be around women. Not help men, but just to be around women. Okay.
Work for Black male studies. This is why it had to be introduced and created. The belief was anything that was happening in Africana studies, for example, or Black studies outside of Black feminism was somehow considered masculine and whatnot. But it really wasn't. And when you really start to go through, particularly The Man Not with Tommy Curry's book, you really start to see what conversation has not been happening about Black males.
Because conservatives are stopping that conversation from happening, sir. That's right. Most of The Man Not, if you actually read it, it's about shit being happening to you by conservatives in society. hmm We could have been outproduced these people, but the people who never cared about the future of children was the main people out here, going out here, trying to have children. Much like right now, most of these people just want sexual access. They don't want to take care of the kids when they're actually born. They want to leave it up to the society and welfare and everything else to take care of these kids once they're actually born. I've never seen a responsible man who actually is complaining about access to women. They want access to the bad types of women that gives very bad outcomes on purpose. They are. Dude, I've seen these people when I was in college myself. A lot of these people went on to do PhD. Look, I was going to go get a PhD in medical research when I was working for the Veterans Administration. Briefly, when I was working for the Veteran Administration. I went to that first actual residency in Seattle, Washington, and I seen the type of people that I was going to be surrounded by. Bullshit artists like what's on the screen right now, like TSI Johnson, who want to talk all this fucking theory, but there is no actual physical thing that we're going to be actually doing to actually fix things because I'm from the business environment. I'm like, okay, we have problem, invest in problem, fix problem, go to next problem, fix that problem, go to next problem, fix that problem. That's not how arts degrees and actual academia work. They want to sit here, have conversations about the same issue for the ever and not fix anything so that way they can keep their place in academia. But you have to understand his actual Flower Girl 6622. His actual issue was never to solve these problems. There are arts degrees that is based on solving problems. And it's never the degree that you pursue. It is what you do after the actual degree that you actually get. Most of the women in my graduating class who got these arts degrees from Delta State, Mississippi Valley, Alcorn, Grambling, Jackson State, they actually did it to actually go correct things in society while working for a nonprofit. This guy right here, he's doing none of that. He's just trying to create a black male study so that way you can study black male victimhood. Okay, you want to get rid of black male victimhood? Okay, just have equal protection under the law. That's one side of it. The other side of it is the main procreating class of people have to give a shit about the kids who they actually create. That's another part of it, right? Because they want to outsource it out to women to be more perfect and accept the imperfect man in imperfect circumstances, rather than understanding the whole thing in total before you get off in these actual circumstances. He said nothing about it. He said nothing about the Smithsonian get rid of shit for the talking about slavery. He said nothing about it. Yeah, what's going on? You see, contrary to popular belief, I'm not even supposed to exist in Black American society. Not me. I'm not supposed to be born in the Mississippi Delta. I'm not supposed to have left school, home at 17 years old. I am not supposed to have actually spent 5.5 years in the military. I am not supposed to have went all the way almost to a PhD. I am not supposed to have actually created an actual business that I'm very successful at. All that shit's an anomaly. You know what's actually pretty normal? What's on the fucking screen is pretty normal among black people. It's pretty normal to be a person who don't want to actually solve problems. Because remember, men are supposed to be solving problems. You can't tell me that creating this black male focused and based education is based on anything but solving problems. It solves his problem of society, but it doesn't solve anybody else's problem in society, right? Because most of this stuff is just conservatism that you're actually fighting. But you don't fight conservatism by having a stagnant conversation in academia without trying to solve any type of problem.
That's when you first begin to really pay attention to it and see what's been missing. So, so that kind of focus is outside the discussion. So those are just some examples. If you want to talk about the percentage of male teachers versus female teachers from kindergarten through graduate.
That ain't got shit to do with you succeeding in life. Okay? They don't have anything to do with you succeeding in life. How many women teachers versus men? One of my first cousins is a teacher in Atlanta. He does not get paid a lot of money. But the thing that he does on the side, which is architect, he owns an architectural firm. And he makes a gang of money with that. Remember, he had to go back and be a teacher. He's the same age I am. He had to go back and be a teacher. Once he had the time equity to focus on things in his community, school included, things started getting better. That's because he took the productivity piece, the actual thing first, before he went to go teach at school and thought that he was going to be able to affect people. People pay more attention to him because of his architectural firm, not the fact that he's an elementary school teacher, right? But when you have these type of non-functional men who hide themselves behind a bunch of education, the only thing these people are overly educated, underproducing men. That's what they are, clearly. What they do is they go to school and they just keep majoring in all these arts-based degrees. And I keep saying it's not the education, it's what you do afterwards. And then they attach themselves like an actual parasite to a host. This is a parasite attaching himself to the host of education without the responsibility of fixing things in society. He doesn't have that responsibility. He don't even have the responsibility of putting forth his agenda to anyone. He just created the agenda, got a whole bunch of people in there on some representation without participation nonsense, and then he just moved on to something else.
School, what the differences are there in terms of that, and of course, especially in the Black world, the Black Academy, those are some of the differences we notice as well. So these kinds of differences in terms of whose narratives, whose voices are where, how they're acknowledged, what frame they're in, and who predominates in physical numbers in some of these spaces, it varies. But much of the time, you notice in retrospect how especially the higher up you go, you tend to be the only male in the room. Or at least that
Mhm.
was the experience I had in many of my cohort colleagues.
You want to know why that is? It's because you're a fucking man and you don't fucking belong there. You belong outside of there, teaching some science based shit and getting people into the skilled trades, not trying to compete with feminists by being an arts major and trying to have stagnant based conversations. That's some shit you should have never done as an actual man. That's a failing of you, no one else. That's your fault. You knew that Africana studies had a lot to do with the feminism piece. You said that. You stayed your ass there anyway. You did not change your actual, you didn't change your major. You stuck with something that you knew that was not going to help people overall. I can guarantee you that you are not talking this bullshit to your son. I can guarantee you your son is doing a hell of a lot better than most of these people who you're actually misleading from an educational standpoint. But you need these broken men so that way you can survive. You can't survive without broken men. At the end of the day, if most men dated actual rational and realistic women and not mess their whole life up over the misuse of procreative faculties, you wouldn't have a job. You're just sitting at the end of this status like a dude with a back catcher's mitt trying to throw these people back into the actual circumstances that they just left. It doesn't make any sense. But he's trying to dress it up as if he's trying to help people out, like he literally dove onto the grenade to help out black men by going and teaching black male victimhood as an actual course to people. Oh, there haven't been a black male focused study. Of course it isn't. Because what you're fighting against is conservatism. You don't need a fucking degree for that. You don't need a degree for that. You don't need it. Listen, your inability to make it in society is your problem, not white people's. You choose to stay in actual situations that don't work, that is your problem, not white people's. You don't maximize things in your environment, that is your fault, not white people. And I'm not no bootstraps conservative. I'm liberal than a motherfucker. And let me tell you, listening to this guy on the right here is going to have you be a permanent victim forever. You don't need to be a permanent victim. You can get up out of these circumstances if you want to. A lot of these people choose to be in these circumstances because there is no expectation of progress. That's why they keep being in these circumstances on purpose.
Had the same kinds of experiences in the places they were in. And to
Mm.
this day, I still get black males finishing doctorates, working on doctorates at various stages of it. I think I'm sitting on about 5 or 6 different doctoral committees. I got one Thursday who's actually defending, but I'm on about 5 or 6 of them because these males are looking to deal with black males in their research,
Mhm.
but they're being attacked sometimes by their own committee.
Fuck are you talking about, bro? You mean to tell me that Atlanta don't exist, Detroit don't exist, San Antonio don't exist, Dallas don't exist? You mean to tell me that they cannot get in contact with black men as a group anywhere, right? That's bullshit. The only thing you have to do, because I've done it before myself, go to your average barbershop and have them promote an actual event where you're trying to talk exclusively to black men. You go rent a building, you have a bunch of food there for people to show up, and you have these people fill out questionnaires. They do the same shit in white communities all the time. That's how they get their racially specific shit off by talking about it and going to get those people who they're actually trying to help to be a part of the conversation. Yes, I know that's exactly how it's done. I'm telling you how it's done. How is it that they haven't figured that out and they're in actual coursework and they haven't figured it out, but I haven't figured it out. Oh no. He's not moving to no conservative state. He's gonna stay in that liberal state where he's at and push that type of nonsense. He's not moving to a conservative state to where he actually have to go do stuff. They're not even going to allow him to have that level of because everything is all about leveraging somebody else's inability to do something so that way he can be their voice to do something. And all of this stuff is going on so much that it doesn't show up in his actual content that he took down. Remember, he took his content down about politics, right? Politics is about solving problems. If you have a person who have a PhD who don't have a side pick, he ain't trying to solve no problems. Because if you solve the problems, there's no need for him to be there, right? Again, I'm a problem solver, business owner. That's how we do. That's how we run. We don't allow these type of bullshit artists to actually join our actual group. If your ass is not in some type of actual career field where you can teach shit to other people or where you can mentor other people, can't join our group. Take your ass to academia with that bullshit.
Sometimes by their own committee chair, because for the most part, it's Black feminists that are the only ones there, and they're, kind of dealt with in a very hostile fashion, and they're looking for ideological support, academic support, intellectual support.
Again, if you went to college to be around Black feminists, that's a you problem. What studies are these people trying to have where they're trying to depend on the feminists of that actual department where they're at to help them out with shit? Help me out with that. What is it that they're trying to actually do there, right? Say it again. Say it again. He has the look, the glasses, the hair hat, the size, everything says Black feminist here. But he calls himself a masculinist, which is not a term. And we're not reorganizing masculinists around somebody that is looking like this. I can guarantee you it's not going to happen.
So that they can rationalize doing the work they want to do without being kicked out. And I've had a few of them experience that as well. But just trying to find resources, not only on Black men, but Black male scholars willing to talk about Black male studies. There's a dearth of that aspect as far as that's concerned. So, we could talk about, we can identify areas if you'd like, but
yeah. Well, you know what? Let's start with, you mentioned education and the overwhelming percentage of teachers being women or female.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of ladies, and even some men that may side with the ladies, that think that, well, what's the issue with that? Like, people get to choose what profession they want to take, and they became teachers. So what's the issue with having such a heavy percentage of overwhelming majority of teachers being women? What could possibly be an issue?
Well, the people that predominate in a given space tend to set the culture, and this is what Helen Andrews was speaking to, really. And she was talking about, when women predominate in a certain space and they enact a culture that is gynofocal, and that becomes the standard for how things happen, it can become in and of itself alienating for men, right? So if you go back to teaching, if the majority of the teachers, especially, the lower grades you go from kindergarten upward, are female, then the culture tends to, especially the pedagogy, tends to respond in that way, tends to function in that way. And boys find that their rates of punishment go up. Detention, expulsion, these kinds of things tend to go up. And then, of course, when you start talking about medication, when you start talking about treatment for...
Yeah. So this is how we dealt with this shit in my community, right? Once they started doing that shit, we started looking at the actual rules, and then we started getting teachers the fuck up out of there based off of how they actually do things. And we didn't call it racism. We call it a very minute statistical based punishment. We didn't call it racism. We didn't call it conservatism. And we made sure that these people know over time, the punishment that you mete out, it better be the same across the board, no matter what the child is across the board. And if it's something different, we got you the fuck up out of there. Like, when there are consequences for people, they tend to not take drastic measures. Yes. Look, it happened to me. Education, they seen I was a high IQ person. You know what they tried to do? put my ass in special ed so that way I had easier coursework. Know what my grandfather did? Took his shotgun down to this motherfucking school and told him to put me back in these fucking AP classes. Because that's where he fucking belongs. Because under his leadership, I am going to be great. And him being smart isn't me being smart is an actual idea of a hell of a lot more education than these actual 8 hours that they put in. That's how you solve that fucking problem. Not with a gun, but coming down there and making sure that your actual teacher is respecting the work that you're putting in.
Behavior, when you notice that those things tend to go up as well. Very different if you go to Nation of Islam schools where they have male teachers and male classes, for example. Very different response.
Boom. You see that? You pointed to other people who solved that problem. Religious-based schools don't have this problem. In religious-based schools, it's going to teach a religious-based education, right? That takes a lot of work to get an educational school from a religious standpoint off the ground. A lot. A lot. They did not depend on some bullshit artist to major in black Muslim studies to get their fucking school off the ground. They had a standard. People went to school for it. People invested in it, and they got outcomes. What do you think we invest in this space? We invest in bullshit, in actual entertainment. You're the person with the PhD, and look what the fuck you're doing. You're the person with the PhD, and you're selling victimhood to the all boys that you're trying to help. You're not trying to solve this problem because it is ridiculous. It is. Even though there are a lot of great theology majors out there who major in their own theology, and they graduate with it, and then they go out and do great things. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is one of those actual people who's a theology major, and he made pretty good strides in society. Again, it's not the education; it's what you do with the education after the shit's over with. When you go to Catholic schools, there are Catholics there at Catholic schools. That infrastructure takes a long ass time to build, a long time to build. But the end goal was to have their own education, to have their own people being processed through there, to spread their culture throughout the world. We don't have that shit within Black America because everybody's trying to be a fucking comedian or an actual sports person or play basketball or football or any one of these buck sports. He doesn't realize he looks the feminist part because he is the feminist in the room in these actual circumstances. I'm going to stop this at 30 minutes of this interview because I'm going to do this by 30-minute blocks because there's a lot wrong with what this guy's saying. And there's a lot wrong with not asking this dude follow-up questions about what he's actually talking about. And as you can notice, you never see black business people in the room with black arts majors for a reason. Because I can ask questions that can shut this whole fucking conversation down. And we can have 10 men and women who care about their sons looking at this actual information to tell you who on earth that they're going to be able to side with. You see, that takes a lot of structure to put together. But being on some bullshit is pretty easy within Black America.
To the students, that whole kind of thing. So the people in the room tend to set the culture of the environment, and the culture of the environment more than often tends to benefit those that reflect the people in the room, and it operates very differently for those outside of that.
No shit. You just not figuring that out? You just not figuring that out? It took you how many degrees for you to figure that out? That's exactly how that works, right? My grandmother taught at an all black school before there was actual desegregation. There was nothing wrong with those kids until they had the choice to not learn. Once those kids had the choice to not learn, they didn't care about learning anymore. That's what happened with integration. But here's the thing about integration. You didn't need white people around as an excuse for you not to go learn shit that you need to learn and compete in society. These people made a conscious choice not to do that shit. Their parents made a choice for their kids not to be in those environments. Right? School is one of the last places where a kid is going to be able to learn. That kid learning has to be a 24-hour operation. That includes the environment. That includes the actual food and nutrition that you actually give them. That includes a lot of that shit. There's a lot that you got to correct about your actual child before you send them into another environment among other lost individuals who can't focus on shit. So he's not stupid. He understands that the people in the environment sets the actual tone for the people there. But the parent has to set the tone for the child as well before them to actually go into these environments as well. That shit used to be called home training, right? I'm not sure what it's called now because you had a bunch of people who went out here and overprocreated the wrong type of children that have a bunch of issues because the parents got issues. And there's not going to be an actual school that's going to solve sociological based issues once those kids leave that environment. You can give them all the actual training and actual advice in the world, but if they're going to a damaged environment after that shit's over with, dude, you're never gonna be able to reach that child. There's no place for the child to be able to stabilize. And this guy is taking advantage of that full system that he knows is in place. Most of this shit is intercultural.
So that tends to be part of the issue. And as far as who's in the room, who gets affected, who gets to say what, who gets honored, who gets cherished, who gets punished, who gets dismissed. And we've seen this across race. I mean, we've seen the study a couple of years ago where they actually tracked.
Okay, let's go through it. How many of these black parents show up to parent-teacher conferences? Almost none of them. And if you almost don't show up as in a non-zo aspect to the parent-teacher conference, they think they can do whatever the fuck they want to your child, and you don't care about it. Because the only thing you got is just putting up with it. Again, this whole school shit takes a lot of investment from the parents to be involved with it. If they know that you're up there and that you give a shit about your child, they know that your child is just not going to be punished over some bullshit, not without no consequences. Again, environment. There has to be a level of investment by the parents who's having these kids. They have to give a shit about their kid before they send their kid off into another environment. Okay? The only thing he's doing is he's 3 and 4 levels above that, and he know he's not providing no real answers or solutions to questions.
The eye movements of teachers in K through 12 classrooms, K through 6, I believe, and they were looking at which people they pay the most attention to, which children, and it tended to be black children, especially black male children, right? Mm-hmm. But these were coming from mostly white female teachers, and so you see in the dynamic of who they, and that was in terms of a punitive treatment, right? You see who they acknowledge as a problem, who they acknowledge as those who are doing well, and I witnessed that, with.
That's not the case. That ain't the case. That black children are just doing so fucking well that they have to oppress the fuck out of these kids. We know most of these black children go to these schools with a lot of fucking issues, right? That ain't got shit to do with the classroom. So to try to make it look like the kids are, on one instance, knocking it out of the park when it comes to attention, when it comes to grades, and then the white teachers are just fucking them up on purpose. That is not even mutually exclusive at all.
My own son growing up, in these environments. So the people in the room have a great deal of impact on who gets to do well, who gets to excel, and who doesn't. And that
Mhm.
becomes a conversation unto itself. The other part of the problem is, and this is coming from many of the young male teachers I've dealt with. I too had this experience when I was teaching K through 12 in the 1990s. Often the culture can be very hostile to Black men moving into teaching in a predominantly female space. One of the things we noticed is that
So why'd you go in this primarily female space then? Like my coaches in high school, them dudes had respect of everybody. Some of them were former NFL players, but those dudes got respect from everybody. Now, most of the actual coaches didn't really teach class all that much. They just came after their real job and did like the actual coaching of, insert sport, baseball, football, basketball. Almost none of them really taught class like that, but they would be, look, if you had to talk to one of these coaches, it wasn't a really good thing because them dudes got you straight, right? You don't need to be surrounded by black people in order for you to exhibit some level of understanding and standards. That's not the case. I don't believe that.
first things that would happen is they would often take the most challenging male students and put them all in the same room with whoever the male teacher is coming in. Now,
Mhm.
many of us had these kind of experiences. You had difficulty getting support. You had difficulty, enacting programs and ideas you might have to help with the kids.
Boom. No. If there's a bunch of kids that have a bunch of fucking problems and they can't actually teach and who can't be around when people actually teach in school, you have to remove those people from the actual work environment. You have to, because school is not a place for teaching kids how to be kids. They're supposed to learn all of that stuff before they even come to school. School is there to teach. School is not to teach people how to keep their hands to themselves and all that kind of other stuff. All that stuff spring up out of all these other issues that are happening outside of the environment of school that the 8 or 9 hours of school cannot solve because that's not their job. Their job is to teach, not to manage sociological and mental health issues.
But they kind of, if you were a male teacher coming in, they'd send you all the male students that were a problem and then just kind of leave you to your own devices to deal with it, whether you were trained for that or not.
Bullshit. At the end of the day, when you go to school, there's an actual curriculum. When they talk about you need so many hours worth of school to actually graduate to the next level of class, that's exactly what that was. They're just not going to let you just deal with a whole bunch of kids in whatever way that you want to deal with them without no type of accountability. That's not how school works, bro. They're not going to allow you to do that. They're not going to allow you to take a bunch of problematic kids into a room and teach them home training. That ain't how that works. You either have the home training before you bring your ass to school. That's how that works.
And of course, the burnout level would be extremely high. But the most difficulty the Black male teachers I've associated with had wasn't necessarily with the kids. It was with the kind of limitation with the administration and even the other teachers on being able to expand on what's been happening in the classroom and how they could take it to another level.
Okay, so when you're dealing with problematic students, you blame the teachers, not the fucking parents. You blame the teachers if they're having a problem with their problematic students, not the parents, right? You see, this is the stuff I'm talking about, man. Like when you have these weak ass men who go into actual education to place blame in hands where it don't belong. If your kids cannot keep his hands to himself, if your kids think that he has to be a threat and a terror to everybody in the school environment, there's a lot with that kid that's going on at home. There ain't nothing wrong with the teachers. I've had good teachers, I've had bad teachers. No matter what, you still got to do the coursework. You still got to learn how to problem solve. You still got to learn how to operate and deal with people. You still have to learn how to do that, regardless of how good or bad these people are. So we're almost at the end of this. We got another 2 minutes. We're going to do, this is the first 28 minutes of this, and you see what's wrong with this. There There are no counter arguments, no counter discussions, and this is why we're in the position where we are at now, because we're trying to build platforms based off of bullshit artists without even trying to solve any type of problem. Because everybody want to talk about problems from an entertainment standpoint, and you bring on victimhood sellers as actual problem solvers when the only thing they're trying to do is make money off of a consistent problem that's here, not solve a problem that's here.
So I'm bringing that up to say it's not just that the culture is influenced by the people there, but it can also be hostile to those that aren't part of that culture, that aren't part of that demographic and that's largely in position. And Black male teachers experience this even at Black schools with predominantly Black female teachers. And they talk about this at length in my spaces. And they've been doing that for the last 8 or so years, about how the climate is hostile to not only themselves, but the ideas they have about how they can help Black male children. That's the problem. And then I noticed it even at Fresno State. We had those kind of situations happen when I first got there. We set up programs to help the kids. The majority of the faculty involved in those programs, just because of who was there in numbers, were Black women. And the response from that, as far as the students, is when you start to go to events, when you start to go to programs, it was overwhelmingly Black female students that were being drawn in, because they were being drawn in by Black female staff and Black female faculty. I had to create a separate program just to get the males, because they felt isolated, they felt excluded, they felt left out, and they felt like nobody was even bothering to talk to them. So in other words, the women faculty were looking for women students. It hadn't dawned on them to go get the male students. They operated with what they were familiar with, and that was their focus. So the male students were just outside. So I had to go get them and bring them in and actually deal with them. And that, for them, was often the first time that a faculty person took interest in them.
Okay, that's the end of the 30 minutes that I can stand looking at and listening to this actual nonsense that I'm actually on the screen. I'm going to do the second 30 minutes of this actual nonsense itself. Listen, you don't need a teacher to take interest in you as an actual student for you to actually go off and do things. All right, this is the link to it. I just put it in the actual chat if you want to actually listen to the rest of this thing, because you have to understand that you need business people who actually care about outcomes being a part of this actual conversation, because we care about outcomes. People in academia only care about presenting narratives. Okay, you have an actual therapist who's listening to a bunch of bullshit being talked about on the screen, and he's saying absolutely nothing about it, which is crazy. So that is what we're done with there. So we do drop the link, see who comes up. Nobody comes up, I'll just do the rest of this later. At the end of the day, it is your responsibility before you go to school to know why your ass is there. It is not the responsibility of the teachers to keep pushing you and prodding you in directions. You have to have a plan when you walk into these actual classrooms. That's what the home training shit is about. Having a plan when you go there. Not trying to make the teachers do the parenting for the parents when they show up there. That's just not how that works. And it makes sense why he's in academia. It makes sense why he didn't take his 19-point agenda to anybody. Because they're going to look at your track record and see what kind of problem that you solve. Because in the political aspect, nobody really takes PhDs all that seriously unless they do specific research on a very specific thing. People who just languish in actual academia, people in politics don't really care about that. Me, as an actual business person, I don't really care about that. Because anybody can present the same discussion over and over and over again without any type of answers to the actual problems here. You got to come up with some type of answers here. You can't say that, oh, well, these disaffected men didn't have anybody to talk to, and I was the first one to talk to them. Yeah, and they talk to a person who doesn't even care about them overall. He's there because of your problems. He's not trying to solve those problems and issues. He's not trying to. Again, People try to entertain their way out of real life circumstances, and it don't work. It don't work. So with that said, I want to thank you guys for listening. I'm going to do a part 2 to this, so that way we can keep going through this, because people who don't have a track record of solving problems cannot just be going other places trying to pretend like they're doing some grand thing to actually help people out here when they're clearly not trying to. So with that said, I want to thank you guys for listening. I'm the man tomorrow. You guys have a really nice rest of y'all night. At the end of the day, if you don't have your shit straight, this feminist, trained feminist on the right is not going to be able to help you with that. That's your responsibility to fix it. With that said, I want to thank you guys for coming through. I'll see you guys next Saturday with the next installment of this actual response to this interview. Have a nice day.